Welcome to the Chrysalis Experience, a podcast designed to inspire you to believe in the power of your voice and the strength of your wings. Your voice is your identity, and flying confidently into the fullness of who you are means standing courageously against ugly culprits like fear, anxiety, doubt, and shame. But you possess the greatness required to fly to amazing heights. Join me every Wednesday as I have impactful conversations featuring inspiring women designed to help you boldly, bravely, and confidently fly in your greatness so your unique voice can make a difference in this world. My name is Donloyn Gadson. I am a Christ follower, author, artist, wife, and mother of 8. I will be your host as we share in this time of renewal and growth. You are a butterfly, and the chrysalis is your birthplace. It's time to believe in your voice. It's time to be transformed. It's time to mount up with wings like butterflies. It's time to take flight. Hello, butterflies, and welcome to episode 10 of the Chrysalis Experience. If you notice, we are coming back to you again with another live podcast experience. Last week was our first time experimenting with this format, and it was the consensus that everyone loved it. So here we are doing it again. We will be coming back to you every Wednesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to bring you the live experience of the podcast. Now, that does not mean that we will not still be streaming to our normal podcasting platforms. You will be able to watch the video playback on Facebook Live, on YouTube. You will also be able to listen in on Libsyn, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Podcast Addict, and there's probably another one. Whatever is your favorite one, you go and check out the Chrysalis Experience. I want to let you guys know that the reason that we're doing this format is because we want you to be a part of the conversation. So if there are any questions or comments that you have as we are discussing the topic for tonight, then please place them in the chat and we will do our absolute best to get to them and to include you in on this conversation. We want your feedback and we want to know what you think. I want you all to be a part of this experience, and I want you to be able to pose questions to the guests that I bring on. So it's going to be a wonderful thing for all of us to enjoy together. I want you to please let us know in the chat and in the comments where you're tuning in from. Give us a shout, say hello, and show us that you care because, liking, loving, and sharing, that means caring. So like, love, and share with another butterfly, share it with someone that you know that this conversation will benefit. So let's get into this evening's topic. And it's a doozy. It's a big one. Change. It's not popular. It is not a popular concept. It is uncomfortable, and most are resistant to it. In fact, over the course of the last 12 months, you've likely heard many people express the desire to get back to normal. But if 2020 has taught us anything, it is that we need to be prepared, ready, and equipped for change. 2020 was the epitome of what I call a chrysalis experience, and that is a time of great challenge that, if approached properly, results in transformation and the emerging of a better and greater you. Change, be it on a grand scale or smaller, is inevitable. And the only way to work change to our advantage is if we engage in the process. In addition to the COVID-19 pandemic, our nation has undergone many events over the course of the last several years that have served as catalysts for change. One such event was Hurricane Katrina. On August 29th, 2005, Hurricane Katrina made landfall as a massive Category 4 hurricane, leaving death, destruction, and devastation in its wake. My guest today was one of the many impacted by this catastrophic, life-changing event. Surrounded by the waters of Hurricane Katrina, Keisha Rivers came face to face with death and her life was never the same. This harrowing experience pushed her to do the deep work necessary for transformation and became the catalyst for the work she does today. Keisha is a successful speaker, change agent, and learning leader. As president of the CARS Group, she facilitates successful outcomes by equipping people to embrace, manage, and lead through change. Leveraging her 15 plus years of experience in the strategic consulting and organizational development space, she creates opportunities for change, growth, and success with clients in a variety of industries. Keisha hosts a podcast entitled Mindset to Mastery, has authored several books, the latest entitled Equipped for Change, doing the deep work of transformation. And she gives back through her 501c3 nonprofit organization, the CARS Institute. Please join us as we discuss Equipped for Change. Keisha.
Hi.
Welcome, sis.
Thank you so much for having me. I am honored. I love this format, and you know I love anything you do, so I am ecstatic about our conversation today.
Thank you. I know it is going to be a great one, first and foremost, because Keisha and I are girls. I know some fabulous women, if you all have not noticed yet, and it's so wonderful to have you here, so wonderful to have her here in this space with us. And obviously, I mean, this is the Chrysalis Experience. This is about change and transformation and growth. And Keisha, that is what you are when I think of a word that is synonymous with Keisha Rivers. It is change. And you have built a strong platform on that concept. And so what I want people to hear from you probably first is just to understand what change is, because I don't think people have the right idea or mindset. That's another thing that you talk about, getting that mindset right. I don't think that people have the proper mindset when it comes to even understanding what change really is. So...
Well, thank you again for having me. This is awesome. And change has become I once remarked that my life has been a masterclass in change. And one thing that I recognized is that there's sometimes when you don't realize the thing that you're really good at, because it's something that you just do naturally, that you seem, it just comes to you. But I found that a lot of times I had to do a lot of reflection, a lot of deep work, and I needed to understand the things that I was going through. So most people look at change as a event. If something happens, COVID, Hurricane Katrina, you lose your job, there's something that happens. I call that the catalyst. That is the event. That's the trigger that gets your attention. But really what people don't realize is that change is a process. You're constantly undergoing change. There's, your hair is growing. You're getting older. For some of us, we're gaining weight.
Right.
Whatever it is, there's always some type of change that you're going through, but it's just so gradual that you don't notice it. So what I challenge people to do is to not look at change through this lens of it's this catastrophic event that I don't know how to deal with. But instead, it's a process that begins with an event.
Yes.
And if we shift it from that event being the end all be all to now understanding that this is just part of the process that I'm going through, you go through the shift of transformation, you go through the next normal. When you understand it as being a process, then you start to, as I call it, love yourself enough to trust the process, because you're going to come out better on the other side.
Absolutely. And I agree completely with that. And I often think about change or that event that is that catalyst, that as an invitation. It's inviting you into that process. It's like, okay, this thing has happened. Or even perhaps this is something that you want to happen, because sometimes not everybody is completely resistant to change. Sometimes they're like, okay, I want a change, but they do not know how to even begin the process of implementing those changes. But I do feel as though that event that you described is an invitation to engage in this process instead of it dragging us along. We are a part of it versus, we're getting dragged through the mud by this thing. We're just trying to hang on for dear life and keep up with what's happening. It's like, no, I am cognizant about what it is that I'm doing. We've got a plan. We've got a strategy. This is what has happened. Now, what shall we do in a pattern or a rhythm that makes sense?
Yep.
And when you're talking about processes, I know that people say that word a lot, but we actually really mean it. We we truly feel the full essence and meaning of that word, because it is a process, and process doesn't feel good.
Right.
Going through, go ahead.
I mean, a big part of the reason why we resist change so much is because we're creatures of habit.
Mm-hmm.
We want to know what to expect. We want to know what's coming next. We want to feel comfortable.
Yes.
And which is why a lot of times when we're going through a process, if we don't know what's on the other side, then we try to hold on to where we are.
Mm-hmm.
And so this whole thing of understanding change as being a process, and it's something that continuously happens. You're not going to get to the pinnacle of success overnight. A lot of people talk about, I want to be the next overnight success. Well, the average overnight success took 10 years in the making.
Mm-hmm.
And growth is a process. Change is necessary. Growth is an outcome of that.
Right.
And we really have to start shifting our thinking to really looking at the things that we're going through and looking at the things that are standing in front of us that we're being presented with,
Mm-hmm.
and saying, how am I going to use this? How can I become better as a result of this? If there's something that is pricking you, that's painful, that's uncomfortable, that's giving you butterflies in your stomach because you see it's uncertain, that's an indicator to you that's an area for growth.
Right.
It's like our own little spidey sense inside that's like, okay, this is something I need to improve on. So, let me pay attention to this.
Yes.
And instead of fighting it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And even as having gone through and still going through everything with the pandemic, and I mean, with anything that is a major change for our nation, our communities, or even in our lives. But specifically, I've noticed, and I mentioned it before, that so many people right now with everything that we're going through, there's this desperation to go back to normal versus, and I will quote you, because you are often heard as discussing the new normal, that people are always trying to go back to what it is that they were comfortable with. And sometimes those are old, antiquated ideas. Change, I feel as though, invites us into this opportunity to come up with new and inventive ways of doing things, because we would not be where we are today. The advancements that we see in society, in culture, and in every area of life, nothing would be what it is if it weren't for change.
Right. And I've amended because I used to talk about the new normal. Mm-hmm. And then I realized people don't really like new all that much anyway. So I had to get them to understand that it's your next normal. And I call it your next normal because you keep having different iterations. I told people, I celebrated my 50th birthday a little bit over a month ago. So this is Keisha 5.0 because there's a different version of me that happens because every year I'm growing, I'm discovering new things. And if you start thinking about change from the standpoint of what's going to be my next, right. And if you think about next, you know that this isn't permanent. This is just another level that I'm getting to. So if this is my next, and then I'm going to stay here for a while, and I'm going to get used to whatever it is, and I'm going to get comfortable. And then there's something else that's going to need to prod me into another next.
Right.
Keisha 5.1.
Right.
How am I going to be different as a result? And I always tell people, even the trees that have roots and a solid foundation and never move, they change with the seasons.
Absolutely.
And we have to be willing to do the same thing, because as human beings, we are always having the opportunity for growth. We always have the opportunity to get better. We always have the opportunity to look at things with fresh eyes.
Right.
You know, there's been a lot in the news lately about people looking back at, you know, Dr. Seuss books or old cartoons or things that were considered acceptable.
Right.
But really, when you look back on it, you're like, you know what? That was not right. That was, you know, that was dismissive. That was discriminatory. That was exclusionary.
Yes.
And it's okay for us to go back and say, you know what? We didn't know. So now we can do something better.
Right. Right.
And that sets you up for more success, because if you can look at your life and say, no matter how I got to where I am, I can always be better. And if there is something that I did in the past, I didn't know, I did the best I could with what I knew. And just always being open to what's my next? How am I going to get better? How am I going to improve myself? What new things am I going to discover about myself and about the world? How am I going to enhance what I already know?
Right. Right.
Because we haven't even scratched the surface of our potential.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I have to say, like, I am so extremely proud of you. So your new book that's out, it was just released in time for your 50th birthday, Equipped for Change. You are discussing change and doing doing the deep work of transformation. And something that I personally am extremely proud of you for is that it's your first time of really doing a deep dive into your experience in sharing what happened with you during Hurricane Katrina. And today will be really the first time that you're actually really talking about it with everyone. So if you would please share with the listeners some of your story, because that was a really pivotal moment for you, that really springboarded you into the work that you do with change and transformation.
Yeah. And I had resisted for a long time talking about Katrina. I was like, I don't want to relive that. I want to forget about that. Let's put that in a box in a dark corner and shut that away, because I don't want to go through that. But part of this process of change is that we have to face the process. We have to face the experience. We have to look at the events. And, you know, I lived in New Orleans, of course, at the time. And when Hurricane Katrina was coming, one thing that people have to realize, when you live in a place like New Orleans or Charleston or anything where hurricanes are the norm, there's always a near miss. There's always a storm that's supposed to be the next big one. And so you develop a little bit of apathy towards it.
Yes.
And indifference. And, it never happens. We're good. And so a year prior, we had just had Hurricane George as a warning. And so we put in all these plans about what we were going to do and everything else, and how we were going to evacuate people and all of that. And because we realized that the systems were not equipped to handle a full-on hit. But of course, as what happens during all change, you can plan, but when everything happens, all of those plans kind of fall apart.
Right.
And so I ended up having to stay in the city because there was no way to get out. I-10 is the only highway, and the highway was choked. Everybody was backed up. People were running out of gas on the highway because you couldn't get out.
Oh, yes.
So I'm in the house, and I'm sitting there watching the news with the continuous loop saying the same thing over and over again. And I remember that I had just gotten off the phone. My cousin had called and, asked how we were doing. And I was like, yeah, it's the same thing. It's just a bunch of wind. The windows are boarded up. We're good. And I hang up, and then the power goes out. And when the power goes out, I'm like, okay, here we go again. In New Orleans, if the wind blew really hard, the power went out.
Right.
No sense for alarm. But then I sit on the couch and I look down at the floor and I see water coming in under the door. And at first I thought, because I had dogs, I said, maybe one of the dogs got nervous and went on the floor. And so I get up to go clean it up, and I notice there's water coming in all along the baseboard.
Wow.
And it starts just pouring in. And then so I go and I climb up on top of a chair and look out because I left a little crack at the top, where we boarded up the window. And I looked outside and my car was covered with water. Because the house was 5 feet off the ground. And if the water was coming in, that meant the water had come up 5 feet, had covered the porch and everything else and was shooting into the house. Well, in about 15 minutes, the water was up to my waist.
Yes.
And I'm, sloshing around and I'm trying to, throw the dogs up in the attic and, grab some things and, bottles of water and stuff like that and throw them up into the attic. And in about the next 5 or 10 minutes, the water is chest high.
Right.
And so I climb up into the attic and I'm sitting there. It's dark because there's no power. And I hear the wind just shaking the house. And there's this it sounds like a train. So I go up there and I'm sitting there and my feet are dangling below me and I look down and the water's rising. And now I look around in the attic and there's nowhere out. There's no window, there's no door. It's just the crawl space. And as I'm sitting there and the wind keeps howling and picking up, and then I notice a corner of the roof start to lift up with the gust of wind. And I'm sitting there and I just grab the rafter above me, the beam, and I'm pulling down, I'm so strong. I'm pulling down and I'm just like, okay, if this roof goes, that's it.
Oh my God.
And I hear my neighbors next door because this is early in the morning.
Right.
And I hear my neighbors next door start screaming because they're awakened to water rushing into their beds. And so there's people on both sides of us screaming and there's the wind and the house is shaking and you're watching the water rise up beneath your feet. And the question I asked was, is this it? And the one thing that I recognized was, if this is it, what did I do with my life? I don't have any children. What legacy did I leave? Right. Is anybody going to remember me? What did I do with the gifts and the opportunities that I had? And at that moment, I came face to face with the fact that if this was it, my life wasn't well lived.
Right.
And I made a decision. I said, I get out of this because, we all make bargains during that time. You're making prayers like, God, if you get me out of this, I'm going to do this.
Yes.
And I'm sitting there and I'm just realizing you have the promise of all this potential. What have you done with it?
Right.
You're going through something that you've read about, that you've seen on television. If this is the end, who's going to remember you? What difference have you made? What impact have you made? How have you touched anybody else? And I recognize that we go through these small little catalysts every day.
Yes.
Every day we're at a crossroads. Every time we have an opportunity to pour into someone else, to make it, you don't know how a small gesture can make a huge difference to someone else. You don't know how speaking up about your experience or what you're going through is going to give light to someone else. All the things that we take for granted and we say, nobody cares.
Right.
It's just me. This is easy for me. Nobody wants to listen to this. Nobody wants to hear this. Yes, I have a book in me, but why write it? There's so many other books. Yes, I could do a podcast, but everybody else has a podcast. Yeah, I could write an article, but there's so much other noise out there. We talk ourselves out of greatness.
Yes.
Every day.
Absolutely.
And Katrina was where it dawned on me that even though I had done a lot in terms of giving back to community and volunteering, and I was a teacher and I was looking at getting my doctorate and going through all of these things. For me, I thought I was making an impact. But when you, in that split second, when you start taking an inventory and you realize I haven't even scratched the surface.
Right. There was still so much more.
Yep. So much more that I hadn't even tapped into. I didn't even know was there. And that's the key part, is that when you are looking at this process of change, you're looking at yourself as peeling back the layers and asking what else is there that I didn't even know I had.
Right. Right. Absolutely. change is really a good thing.
Mhm.
It's a good thing. We just have to get through the uncomfortable parts.
Yep.
You
There
know?
is no change without discomfort.
Right.
So,
Absolutely.
so I tell people, get comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Yes.
Just okay, this is what's going. All right, something else is happening.
Yes.
You're not designed to stay in the same space. You're not designed to be static. That is
Right.
not how we're created.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to lean into that.
Right.
Because if you
Go ahead.
if you stop resisting it, then it'll become easier.
Right.
It's only painful and really horrible because we're resisting it.
Right. Absolutely. And one thing I like that you said is that the only thing that is a certain and a constant is something that you can bank on is change.
Yep.
And that's the absolute truth. So when it comes to not resisting, so that means if you're not resisting and you're not giving pushback, then we need to trust the process.
Yep.
And so one thing that you talked about in the book, because the book is beautiful, first of all, I just have to say it again, that this is a big deal. And I feel like this book is a perfect representation of the work you do and your personal story. It is like, it is the perfect package. It's Keisha Rivers. It's perfectly put together. And I know that because I know you personally, and I know your story, and I know what you went through, and I know what you do. And so this was just this marriage of your personal testimony as an example woven throughout, and you divided the book up into two parts, where the first part you're talking about change on the personal level, and then the second part you discuss change on a level of like for an organization or an institution, which of course you say in the book, organizations are people. It's a community of people. So the change must begin in order for an organization or an institution to handle and navigate change successfully. That change has got to take place in the individuals that are there. So it is important for all of us to do the personal work. So I say that to say that this book is like, it's perfect union of applying to your personal life as well as your professional.
Yeah.
And
there is no separation. People start, one thing that the pandemic has taught us, there's no separation between personal and professional.
Yes.
One informs the other. I've talked to people and they constantly talk about, we're working from home. I'm like, no, we're at home during a global pandemic trying to work.
Right.
You have to start with the personal first.
Yes.
If you don't start with the personal and you don't understand how people are navigating this, the challenges that they have, the mindset shifts that need to happen, how they feel about themselves, how they feel about their environment, how they connect with other people. If you don't focus on the people side of change, you're dead in the water.
Yes.
And so I tell people, there's something in this book for everybody, because even if you do not work at a Fortune 500 company, if you have your own business, you still need to read this book.
Right.
If you are working in an organization, you need to read this book. If you're leading people, you need to read this book. If it's just you and you're retired, you still have other things that you need to discover about yourself and understanding the next normal that you're going through and your next phase, because as you're getting older, there's an adjustment there.
Yes.
And I use myself as an example because, as I said before, I pushed back on sharing a lot of my personal story because, I'm private. I'm old school. I'm from Charleston, South Carolina. We don't want nobody in our business like that. Like, just back up off me. All you need to know is the professional side.
Right.
But I recognize that the greatest strides that I made was when I infused my personal side. Yes. I did not separate my personality from who I did. Who I am is how I show up.
Right.
Like there is no, corporate Keisha and then personal Keisha.
Right.
Like, this is who I am. And if I want to encourage people to show up fully, wholly, and authentically as their whole selves, I have to do the same thing.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So this, it wasn't planned, because, the first version of this book, I wrote the first 10,000 words, and it was a primer in corporate and organizational change. And I read it and I went, oh, that's crap. I said, that is not me at all. So I scrapped it and started over.
And what came out was very organic, very real. And also just evidence of the fact that you aren't just teaching people these things, you're applying them to your own life. And so you can see that, okay, or at least those of us who know you, or maybe perhaps have other books of yours, because this is not your first book, can see the difference in terms of the content and the way that you've presented it and presented yourself really fully showing up in the book. One part that you discuss is the difference between triage and trusting.
Yes.
So we have to trust this process of change, but do you need to break this down? Because some of us, because as I was reading it, I was like, am I triaging things? I started analyzing. So I think people need to understand what you mean by that, triage and trust. Let's talk about that.
So if you go to the ER, the first person that you see after you check in and give them your insurance information, to make sure you can pay for this. The first person you see is a triage nurse, and the triage nurse pretty much assesses what level of emergency you're at. Is this something that, okay, you're in a bit of discomfort. We don't have to deal with it right now, but it's eventually going to be dealt with. So you're kind of lower on the totem pole. You're not emergent. You're not urgent. You're just like, okay, we can put you on the side. There's another level where you may be a little bit more, you need some type of intervention. Something needs to happen. You have a bandage put on, you need to, get a shot, you need to get something. They do something right then that'll tide you over for a little bit. They're not solving the problem.
Right.
They're not treating why you came in there, but they're doing something to really kind of, set you up so that you can bide your time for a little while. And then they'll put you back on the side. You're still the way you were when you came in. You're just a little bit more comfortable. And then you have the top where you're urgent. Like, we need to move right now. Put this person in the back stat, get them into surgery, do something to correct this. And as we go through this process of triage, a lot of us subconsciously will look at our situation and say, you know what, do I need to put a Band-Aid on that? And kind of sit on the side. You know what, I can deal with that for a little bit more. That's okay. It's not really that bad. Maybe a little bit uncomfortable, but I'll suck it up. I'm good. I can walk it off. And then we get to a point where we have to do something about it. And so we make an effort. We sign up for the gym and we go for a couple of months. Or, if it's a toxic relationship, we say, you know what, I'm going to give myself some space from this person and, maybe limit my interactions, but we don't cut off all ties.
Right.
Like, we do something to make ourselves feel as if we're making some type of progress or some type of effort, but we're not solving the problem.
Right.
We're not addressing the source.
Right.
And it's not until we get to the point where we are forced to take that immediate action. Surgery has to happen. Something has to get cut off. Something has to change immediately. That's when we enter into that, what we feel is chaotic.
Right.
Where I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to deal with this. And really the situation forces you to make a change and to do something different, when all before you had these little warning signs that were telling you, no, I don't need a Band-Aid. I need something more. No, you're going to keep ignoring this problem and I'm going to keep coming back. Okay, I can make you feel good right now and put you on the side, but it's going to come back a little bit worse later.
Right.
And when we triage it, that means we don't trust the process, that we need to get rid of it.
Yes.
We're still keeping this in our lives. We're still operating in the same mindset. We're still doing things the same way, we're just making ourselves feel a little better about it. So are you going to triage your issues, or are you going to trust the process that this is something that needs to change and change drastically?
Right. Absolutely. So you also talked about in that same section regarding trust and triage, part of trusting the process of change is reclaiming your voice. So I really want to talk about how change, because that's what we're all about here at the Chrysalis Experience. This is all about voice, ultimately. How change can affect your voice, how it can affect your voice, and how it should affect your voice, because that, depending on the individual, can be two different things.
Yes. And this notion of voice is something that has been evolving, with me for years. And I talk about in the book, when I was in first grade, I learned to read when I was 4. And so by the time I got to first grade, I was reading chapter books, and this was, back in the 70s when you had the rows and, all the kids in first grade were, the teacher would pass out the worksheet that had the letter of the day, and you trace the letter and you trace the word, and then you color the picture that that represented the word. And, and this is what they did.
Right.
So my teacher would pass out the worksheets, and since my last name was Rivers, I'd be at the back. And by the time she gave me my worksheet and walked back up to the front of the room, I'd finished it and I was standing behind her holding it up like, okay, what's next? And, and so she was like, okay, well, you have to wait for the other kids to be finished. And I'm like, well, I don't want to wait. I want to play. Like, I want to talk to somebody, And so I would go and start talking to people. And she'd say, no, they have to do their work. You can't talk to anyone or play with anyone until they're finished. Problem solved. I'm going to go help them with their work. and then once they're done, I can play with them. So she went through this whole cycle with me for a couple of months. And at one point, I guess she just had enough. And we did the same thing where she came up and, I had the paper in front of her and I went over to somebody else to try to get them to help. And she lost it. And she picked me up and she sat me down in this little, the little kid-sized chair. And she pulled out this duct tape and she taped me to the chair and she taped my mouth shut. Now I'm 7.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting in front of the class with my mouth taped shut, taped to this chair. And I sat there for 2 hours. Everybody just looked at me. Nobody said anything. Nobody spoke up for me. Nobody even looked at me. And then when it was time for us to go, out for our morning recess, she untaped me and I just got in line and I went out and I sat on this playground by myself for the entire recess. Nobody said anything to me. Nobody approached me. It was like, okay, you spoke up and we're just calling us in trouble. So we don't want to be associated with you. And that experience, I was 7. It took me 40 years. To get back to the point of reclaiming my voice.
Right.
And there are people that talk about finding your voice. You never lose it.
Nope.
You just have to reclaim it. You just have to
Absolutely.
say that this is mine.
Yes.
And I'm going to own it.
Absolutely.
And the other books that I wrote were books that I wrote based on intellect and based on my professional, voice. And this is what's acceptable for me to say in this professional setting.
Right.
But who I am, the things I've gone through, my Hurricane Katrina experience, the evolution of who I am, the things I have to say, the way that I speak up, how confident and assertive and strong I am, where other people would call me intimidating and say that I was too angry. I'm not angry. I'm passionate.
Right.
I'm not intimidating. I'm confident.
Right.
And so because I let other people's insecurities, other people's uncertainty, other people's, inferiority complex, I let them put that onto me so that my voice was silenced.
Right.
No one can make you feel inferior without your consent.
Mm-hmm.
No one can make you feel intimidated without your consent. No one can make you feel silenced without your consent.
Mm-hmm.
And so change, because it's so unsettling for all of us, it causes us to doubt who we are if we are not trusting the process.
Right.
If you don't know that this is going to make me stronger, this is going to pull away and peel away anything that does not belong. This is going to strengthen those areas that are weak. This is going to show me that I am who I think I am.
Mm-hmm.
Then you're going to shy away and you're going to be silent.
Right.
And that is not what change is designed to do. Change is designed to bring out the best in you. Change is designed to cause you to look at things through new eyes.
Yes.
Change is designed to shake that tree and get rid of the low-hanging fruit that's just hanging on barely, so that you can have it fall to the ground and you can be left with the things that are strong.
Absolutely.
And so when I talk about reclaiming our voice, I talk about looking at the times when you were so uncertain about who you were that you allowed other people and circumstances and situations to cause you to be silent when you should have spoken up.
Mm-hmm.
When you are faced with an instance where someone is saying that you're intimidating or you're aggressive or you're angry or, they're not confident in your ability, and you take that on as being yours when that's not yours.
Mm-hmm.
Reclaim who you are.
That's right.
Maxine Waters was famous for saying, I reclaim my time. No, I'm not going to let you infringe on what I'm saying. I'm reclaiming my time.
That's right.
So I'm not going to let circumstances and change and the process that I'm going through intimidate me into being silent.
Absolutely.
I'm going to reclaim my voice. I'm not going to allow you to take that from me.
Yes.
Because that's who you are at your core.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's really... The Chrysalis Experience is called what it is because this is it's like something so tiny, small, and sweet. God has given us as a perfect example of how it should be for us. We enter into these moments, these events, this catalyst for change becomes a chrysalis experience for us. It becomes the opportunity where, yes, when we enter into this situation, it's going to be uncomfortable. We're going to be melted down. But what's going to rise to the surface are all the beautiful parts. When we trust the process, when we engage in that process, what rises to the surface are all these beautiful things. All the gunk that we don't need drops away, and we are formed and fashioned into this new beautiful creation with gorgeous wings, ready to fly, confident in ourselves, understanding our voice is powerful and it is our own. And those attacks against our voice oftentimes come when we're very small.
Yes.
When we don't understand what it is to say, oh, no, you don't. I don't, what you're saying doesn't apply to me. I'm not accepting that. I'm standing in my power and in my voice. Children, that happens to us and we're like, whoa, what's going on? And many times we don't even know how to articulate it to the adults in our lives who can advocate for us, or sometimes the adults are not advocating, or sometimes the adults that you're supposed to trust and who should be advocating for you are the very ones who are coming against your voice and filling you with these lies so that you don't have what it takes at the very core and heart of you to be able to go into all of the different opportunities for change throughout your life. Yeah. Life literally is a series of one change after the next. And if we aren't confident in who we are or our voice, then how do you navigate change successfully without it feeling like it's threatening you?
Right. And I tell people that you have to distinguish between the process of change and just chaos.
Yes.
Like there are a lot of people that, your life, it's just chaos.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's no growth. There's no process. There's just a whole bunch of stuff that's just, coming at you. And you have to distinguish, because when all you see is chaos and all you see is upheaval, that's an indicator that there's no foundation.
Mm-hmm.
you're just kind of, you know, getting tossed about, and you'll have to reset yourself and recenter yourself so that you can understand, okay, where do I go from here?
Right.
I've told people I was used to moving around when I was little. We moved around a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And so I developed this thing of, okay, my life means that I'm going to be moving. You know, I move into a new place, I don't unpack. I move into a new house, I don't throw away the boxes because I'm used to moving.
Mm-hmm.
I don't put down roots because I don't know how long I'm going to stay.
Right.
You know, I know you and some of my other friends, y'all are like, okay, Keisha's on a milk run because, you know, you'll call me and ask me where I am, you know, before COVID. And they're like, you know, why are you in Myrtle Beach?
Right.
Well, I was going to get milk. You're in Myrtle Beach. That's 3 hours away. Well, you know, there's milk in Myrtle Beach. Or, you know, you call me and find out where I am and I'm 2 states over.
Right.
But it prepared me for being okay with changing my location.
Yes.
But it also subconsciously taught me that I didn't have any roots.
Yes.
I didn't have any foundation.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm going through the process of buying my first house. You know, Keisha 5.0, I'm buying a first house at 5.0 because my thing was, I don't need to put down roots anywhere. I'm going to move anyway.
Right.
So when you go through all of this, even though you look like you're successful, even though it looks like everything is working and running on all cylinders, you still look at, okay, what are their little indications of?
Mm-hmm.
You know, what are the little things that, you know, I have triaged because this was all right. It's not bothering me.
Mm-hmm.
It's not causing me any issues. What are the things that I'm really not facing?
Right.
And you're right. So much of this starts when we're little because our foundations are formed when we are little.
Yes.
And most of our life is spent undoing some things that happened when we were little and reforming opinions and views of ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I tell people all the time, you're just a bigger version of your 7-year-old self.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And so what happened to you when you're 7 and helped to form who you are, you just added layers on top of that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and being a former first grade teacher, 7 is the year that I attribute to when you come into your own.
Mm-hmm.
And first grade is when you go from, you come in at the beginning and you're still babies and still kind of clingy, to the end of first grade, you're independent and you have formed your personality and you know what you want to do and you're making your own decisions and you're speaking up for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
That's the beginning of it.
Right.
And so the way that starts, you just add more layers onto it.
Absolutely.
So for me, it was 40 years of not having a voice.
Mm-hmm.
And then what I didn't have, I was like, okay, well, I'm talking about a whole lot of stuff now.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, I had to start thinking about, even though I was speaking up on behalf of others, I still wasn't speaking up for me.
Yes. Isn't that so much easier to do, right?
I know.
And people have no idea. They probably look at you and think, oh, you've had it together forever. No, it's just because I know how to stand up for other people. I know how to advocate for others. I was a little bitty girl standing up for my brother. Oh, I thought he was my child. I'll still refer to him as that was my first child. He's 5 years younger than me. But because of what I had experienced, I was determined that no one was going to hurt him. Now, I wasn't standing up for or voicing on behalf of myself, but I was most assuredly standing up for protecting and keeping him safe. And that has persisted. That type of attitude has persisted throughout my life. I know there have been times where I've gotten on my husband's nerves because I'm like, like the guard dog, you know, like he's like, Lord, keep this woman on a leash. My producer, shout out to my producer. And it's so easy to use your voice to stand up for someone else, but then when it's time to use it for yourself, you're like, I don't. What am I supposed to say? Who am I? How am I supposed to? What do I do next? Yes.
And I tell people all the time, all those doubts in your head, all those little voices that start whispering all these things that you're not good at, and who do you think you are, and all of that. all that is your uncertainty.
Yes.
And really, a lot of it are things that other people have said about you.
Yes.
Or things that other people have done to you.
Right.
And or the way circumstances have unfolded that has caused you to doubt who you are.
Right.
And so when it comes time for you to speak up, like I had this thing I would tell people when I used to do my women's groups for Released and Ready. And I had someone, I would walk in and, you can't tell, but I'm 5'10", and, most of the time before COVID, I'd be walking around in 5-inch heels.
Mm-hmm.
And I started doing that because I'm tall.
Mm-hmm.
You can't miss me when I walk in a room.
Right.
And I never wanted to be the center of attention.
Yes.
Like I wanted so bad to walk in a room and slink down in the back and kind of observe and see what was going on and not have people notice me.
Mm-hmm.
But because I was always put on the spot,
right,
because I'm taller and, I'm usually the only Black woman in the room and, all of this. And so I really didn't want to speak up.
Mm-hmm.
And so I knew what that felt like, to feel like the spotlight was on me and it was uncomfortable.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I saw someone else who was being, put on the spot, I would go to bat for them and say, no, you're not going to treat them this way.
Right.
No, you're not going to do this for them. And all these little things that would come into my head when it was time for me to advocate for me, never once entered my head when I was advocating for someone else.
Right. Absolutely.
Because I was confident in who they were.
Yes.
But I wasn't confident in who I was.
Right. Which means we really need to extend ourselves kindness. Because
yes.
if I can be kind and compassionate and show empathy for someone else, we have got to do that for ourselves.
Yes.
It is important. All of this goes hand in hand. Love for yourself, treating yourself with kindness, believing and trusting in your voice and what it is you have to say. All of that is a perfect setup to be able to handle change successfully.
Right.
No matter what the change is. Like this can apply. This book, literally, when you were going down the list of people who need to read this book, if you are a stay-at-home mother, you need to read this book. If you are a wife and you have children and you run a business from home, you need to read this book. I mean, this goes from one extreme to the next, because no matter what facet of life or area of life that we're operating in, we have to show up with our voices intact. We have to show up ready to go through and do, like you say in the book, do the deep work of transformation, because it is a work and we have to be committed to it and ready to roll up our sleeves and say, okay, let's get this job done. And I love the way that you even put in the book about the difference between solving a problem versus designing solutions. One is just so much more positive and proactive and engaged than the other. You're solving a problem, you're just reacting. But if you're creating solutions, then you are engaged in this process and you are beginning to lay out things that are literally stepping stones to success.
Yeah. And I always tell people, I said, love yourself enough to trust the process.
Yes.
And the first time I said that to someone, they're like, well, what do you mean?
Mm-hmm.
I said, well, do you love yourself? They're like, well, yeah. I said, well, trust the process.
Right.
That this is better for you. This is going to be good for you. And when I made the distinction between solving a problem or creating a solution, people are always saying, well, I'm a great problem solver. But if you think about it, when you are solving a problem, you're focused on the problem.
Mm-hmm.
You're focused on what's wrong.
Right.
You're focused on the parameters that you have to work within based on how you define the problem.
Mm-hmm.
So your focus is the problem. But if you're designing a solution, now you're being creative.
Yes.
Now you're being innovative. Now you're saying, okay, what can I put together that will get me to this result? I talk a lot about mind movie of success. I need to have a vision of where I'm going, of what success looks like. How do I design something to get me there? Because especially now, when we're talking about a global pandemic and we're talking about COVID and all these different systems that need to change and how work is going to change, because we're not going to be able to go back to normal.
Yes.
Everything has changed. The way we educate children should change. The way we talk about and look at the way that the workplace operates should change. There are going to be ripple effects from this time that are going to extend years from now.
Right.
So when we're looking at this, what solutions can we design that's going to fit what success looks like then?
Mm-hmm.
Not what success looked like before, because we're different now.
Right.
And you have to recognize that, and you have to embrace that, because you can't go back.
Mm-hmm.
Like I'm 50. I can't go back and say, I'm going to start off as I'm going to be a 2-year-old now. I'm good.
Right.
I'm going to start over. I'm going to take all the stuff I know now and I'm going to go back to then. Like, it doesn't work that way. We can't say we want to go back to being 7 and, have be in our coloring fort. Yes. I do that, but, now I'm just 50 in a coloring fort. So it's this thing of understanding the process and recognizing that there are new tools that you're going to create. Right. There are new ways of thinking. Yes. There are new ways of doing. And I always talk about, you have to think differently, shift your mindset in order to be different, in order to do something different. Mm-hmm. You can't skip steps. It doesn't work that way.
Yes. How can we use change as a means to stand in our power?
The easiest way to do that is whenever you are faced with a new situation, a catalyst, an event, something that causes you discomfort, something that causes you to feel as if your foundation is being rocked. The first thing that I do is I always stand and I say, okay, you can handle this. Mm-hmm. What is the one thing about you that you can hold on to? Whether it's the fact that my brain is random abstract, so I can go through a number of steps and look at the end game and then backtrack to figure out how to get there. Right. Whether it's I'm creative, whether it's I'm resilient, whether it's, I speak up, whether it's, I have stamina, whatever it is, pick something. Yes. And say, this is what I know about me. Mm-hmm. This is part of the reason why I have gotten through all of what used to be my worst days. Yes. I've survived them all. May have some scars, may have some bumps and some bruises, but I have gotten through them all. What is it about me that I can stand on, that I know? And use that. And speak up. Yes. Like, just, it was ironic because I had this whole week-long, celebration. I'm making the big 5-0, and, I was going to take a week off from work. I'd worked myself up to that point, and, I was going to party COVID style and, go do some stuff. And as is what usually happens when I work too much and I don't rest enough, I got sick. Mm-hmm. And so, I get the cold and it turns into a flu, and, my body's like, the body employees are like, we're on strike, we're done. But this time was different because this time was the first time that I had actually had laryngitis. Right. I lost my ability to speak. Mm-hmm. And so I was on voice rest where I could not use my voice for like a week and a half. Right. I had laryngitis for like 3 weeks. And I kept trying to push it. And finally the doctor was like, you just need to go on voice rest because this is not working. I can't give you any more steroids. Nothing is working. And during the time when I was silent, I thought about all the ways that I could have used my voice. And I thought about, what do we define as voice? Is it just you hearing me? All right. Or is it written word? That's right. Is it, me, putting together pictures? Is it, writing articles? Is it, there are all these different ways we have of expressing ourselves. That's right. That we don't tap into. That's right. And so I looked at, I couldn't speak, but I looked at all of these opportunities that I have, all these platforms. Right. I'm a contributing writer on like 4 different platforms. Mm-hmm. I don't really write articles. Mm-hmm. Why not?
Right.
That's a voice. That's a segment of my voice.
Absolutely.
So this book was coming out right around my birthday. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to do this series of videos and everything. And it's like, but you're not writing. You wrote a book, but you're not writing about the book. You know, all of these different ways that we have to express ourselves.
Yes.
And we hone in on one part and say, well, if I can't do that, then I can't do it.
Right.
You know, if you want to do videos, fine.
Right.
If you want to do podcasts and just audio, fine. If you want to write, fine. If you want to do spoken word, fine. If you want to dance, fine. If you want to draw, fine.
Yes.
Want to write poetry, whatever. There are so many different ways for us to express ourselves.
Absolutely.
Voice does not just mean what you can hear.
Right.
Voice is about expressing who you are at your core.
Yes. Yes. My butterflies know that. That's what I keep teaching them. Voice is your identity, and it is expressed in a multitude of ways. You don't even have to say a word, and you can express. And you're with your body language, the way you walk in a room, like you said, dance, art, writing, drawing. It is not just the audible sounds that come from our mouths. It is the expression of ourselves. It is expression of our identities in whatever form that we choose to do it. And so that is great. So here you had lost your ability to speak. And now there was a catalyst. There was an event that happened. It was like, okay, so what are you going to do? How are you going to respond to this invitation, to this event, to change in terms of, okay, now that I cannot speak, how will I express myself? So that is awesome.
And that was another, you know, in the process of change, catalyst of the event, shift of transformation. I call that the aha moment. When you go, you know what? I need to think about this. Okay, you know what? I thought I learned that lesson. You know what? Oh, that's what this means. And then now it's that next normal of what are you going to do? How are you going to apply it? Right. How are you going to be different?
Absolutely.
Because it all change, all processes come back to that one question. How am I going to be different? How am I going to be better as a result of this process? Yes. That's just, if you just ask yourself, how am I going to be better on the other side? How am I going to be different on the other side? If you're not going to be different and you're not going to be better, then what are you doing it for? Absolutely.
I love that question. I love that question. So ladies in the chat, y'all need to write that. How am I going to be different? That is the whole, that's the whole thing. That's the goal. How am I going to be different? What's going to happen? How am I going to be different for the better? Yes. You know, how am I going to be better? So where can everyone find your new book? Because y'all see I have my copy.
You can
Mr.
go
Producer, you can put the book on the screen, Mr. Producer.
You can find the book on my website at karsgroup.com. That's KARSgroup.com. You can get an autographed copy by ordering directly from me. You can also find it on Amazon. Yes. It will be on Barnes and Noble and a whole lot of other places. It's being kind of populated and spread out into all these other places over the next coming weeks. But my website and Amazon are the two top places where you can go right now. Yes. But awesome. I'm excited. Absolutely excited.
Awesome. Keisha, thank you for being here with all of us today. I didn't see any questions in the comments, just a lot of people shouting you out, giving you a lot of hearts, a lot of love, and really being supportive in everything that you've said and receptive of everything that you said. So I know I, for one, am going to be applying these principles. I appreciate you coming and sharing with us and sharing with my community and spending this time with me today.
Thank you so much for having me. It was interesting because when I lost my voice for a period of time, because I was actually kind of hesitant about going on shows and talking about the book. I went through this whole process and I'm like, I don't need to talk about this. Let me just put the book there. People can read it. And when I lost my voice for those 3 weeks, it was like, nah, you need to get out here and start talking. So I
Yes.
really appreciate it. You are my first interview.
That's right. Thank you very much. Yes, this is your virtual book tour. So I am privileged to be the first stop on the virtual book tour. So everyone, I highly recommend her book, Equipped for Change, doing the deep work of transformation. And like she said, you can go to carsgroup.com or Amazon.com to check it out. I just want to thank everyone for joining us tonight. Thank you for listening. Thank you for encouraging us to continue to do this live platform, live streaming to Facebook and live streaming to YouTube. I appreciate you all on YouTube and on Facebook for watching and joining live. Thank you for those who will watch in the replay, and much love to all my podcast listeners. We will see you next week, Wednesday at 8 p.m. for the next episode of the Chrysalis Experience. You all be blessed and have a good one. Thanks, Keisha. Thank you for joining me for this week's episode of the Chrysalis Experience. If you know an inspirational woman whose life or experiences carry a powerful message of voice, then email me at Donloyn@Donloyn.com. I'd love to invite her to the conversation. Also, visit my website at Donloyn.com. That's DONLOYN.com. There, you'll find links to subscribe so you'll never miss an episode. Also, check me out on Facebook and Instagram, and be sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel at Donloyn LeDuff Gadson. Until next time, remember, your voice is powerful. Be transformed, emerge, and take flight.